Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thanks for tuning in this evening for our online Bible study. Let's get into it. I welcome you. If you are new to this study, I'm Pastor Dave St. Aubin, and it's a joy to be with you here this evening. Tonight, we will be looking at the book of Ezekiel, chapter 22. So I invite you to grab your Bibles, open them up to Ezekiel 22, grab something to take some good notes with, grab a beverage, and grab a snack. Let's get into it. Well, again, good evening and welcome. Thanks for tuning in. I pray that your day's been going well. Pray that your week has been going well so far. Happy Wednesday. Good to be with you again as we continue our journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. And we have made it now into the book of Ezekiel, chapter 22. And chapter 22, we've looked over the last couple nights at this prophecy of this sword that is coming, the sword representing King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, and coming in to fulfill God's judgment on the people Israel. Tonight, we're going to look at these idolatrous rulers of Judah. So God is now going to clarify one of the primary reasons for the sword, this violent judgment that was quickly approaching Judah and Jerusalem. The reason was the sins of not the previous generations of Israelites, but the present, particularly the leaders of Judah and Jerusalem. In chapter 20, Ezekiel reviewed the guilt of the Israelites throughout their history, from the time of the Exodus to the wilderness wanderings to their time in the Promised Land. Chapter 22 now, Ezekiel is going to expose the guilt of the present generation of the Israelites. And we're going to see three messages of judgment in this chapter that make these accusations. They indict the people of Judah. And in all three of these messages, these indictments, Ezekiel is going to act in the role of prosecutor. He's going to present the evidence of the guilt of the people of Judah. The people's covenant violations, because they had broken the covenant through Moses of God. There were really two broad strokes of these violations. Sin against God, that was this spiritual adultery, this apostasy, and sins against the people, these injustices. And these two broad brush strokes cover the Ten Commandments in whole. They had broken both parts of the commandment. The first part being covenant with God, honoring God. The second part having to do with relationships among one another. And the people had broken all of that, not just the Ten Commandments. So all the specific covenant commands that God had laid down all throughout the Torah, the people had broken them all. So that's the background for chapter 22. Let's get right into it here. Open up your Bibles to that chapter, and if you don't have a Bible with you, as always, not a problem. We have all the verses up here on the screen for you so you can follow along. Take some good notes tonight. A short chapter, but still a lot to look at. So let's start with verses 1 through 16, which are going to focus on the covenant unfaithfulness. So verse 1, the word of the Lord came to me. So another message from God comes to Ezekiel. And this message is going to remind the residents of this bloody city of Jerusalem about all their abominations. Verse 2, Son of man, will you judge her? Will you judge this city of bloodshed? And so Jerusalem was bloody, because of all the blood that the residents had shed, the blood of the innocent people. This wasn't yet because of the blood shed because of the Babylonians. This is because of what the people did to each other. And so now a list of these specific sins was going to come against them, which was necessary in order for Ezekiel to act as this prosecutor, to indict the people, to pronounce this judgment on them. The primary offense was the shedding of blood. And that shedding of blood had its roots in idolatry. So these pagan practices that the people had adopted, they didn't curb their abuse of other people. In fact, it did the opposite. The leaders were oppressing the poorest of the country, the city rather. They were killing them. Idolatry promoted the taking of other life through sacrifice, through human sacrifice. And 7 times in this prophecy, the word blood or the word bloodshed occurs, and it characterizes the crimes against God's covenant that had been occurring routinely among the people of Jerusalem. And these words, blood and bloodshed, they have a unique meaning in the Hebrew language that often gets lost in translation into English and other translations, other languages. The words blood and bloodshed, they connote harm or hurt. That really is much of what verses 1 through 16 is all about, the harm and the hurt that is done by the people in power, not just in Jerusalem, but throughout Judah, to those who don't have any power, the sick, the uneducated, the poor, the weak. Blood and bloodshed here really mean, in Hebrew, anything that is just simply vile or violent, even if it doesn't actually involve causing physical harm. It is a violent act. So when we see these words blood and bloodshed, keep that in consideration, that it doesn't just mean spilling of blood. This means vile, horrible treatment of other people, which goes against the second part of the 10 Commandments altogether and God's covenant. Next verse, then confront her with all her detestable practices, verse 3, and then say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You city, Jerusalem, that brings on herself all this doom, how, by shedding blood in her midst, defiles herself by making idols, you have become guilty because of the blood you have shed, and you have become defiled by the idols you have made. You have brought your days to a close, and at the end of your years has come. Therefore, I will make you an object of scorn to the nations, a laughing stock to all the other countries. Those who are near, those who are far away, they will all mock you, you infamous city full of turmoil. So God is regarding Jerusalem as a city that sheds blood in the midst of this crafting of idols, which is contrary to their own well-being. And for those sins, their time of judgment is coming. They had brought this judgment on themselves. God would also make this nation a source of mockery among the nations, both near and far, because of their reputation for all this turmoil. And so now the next 6 verses, verses 6 through 12, Judah's rulers are the main focus of this indictment that is coming from Ezekiel. So verse 6, here comes the prosecuting attorney, Ezekiel, speaking for God in this prophecy. And here's the list. See how each of the princes of Israel who are in you uses his power to shed blood. So the rulers of Israel had been guilty of bloodshed, each within their own realm of authority. And they did this by misusing their power. This included capital punishment, child sacrifice, violence against the people. Again, bloodshed, this vile act against human beings. Verse 7, in you they have treated father and mother with contempt. In you, speaking to the leaders again, they have oppressed the foreigner, mistreated the fatherless, the orphan, mistreated the widow. Judah's leaders had undermined parental authority. They had taken advantage of the helpless, the alien among them, the orphan, the widow. These were all people who were in need of protection by these people who were in power. But instead, the people in power caused great harm to these individuals. Verse 8, the list continues. You have despised my holy things. You have desecrated my Sabbaths. In you are slanderers who are bent on shedding blood. In you are those who eat the mountain shrines, or eat at the mountain shrines, and commit these lewd acts. So these leaders had also despised what God considered to be holy. They had failed to observe the Sabbath. Some of them had also resulted to slander in order to get their way. They had resulted to premeditated murder. They had worshipped idols. This is all speaking of the leaders of the city. They had worshipped these idols at the mountain shrines. They practiced these outrageous, immoral, sexual sins, all in connection to their idolatry. Verse 10, the list continues. In you are those who dishonor their father's bed. In you are those who violate women during their period when they are ceremonially unclean. In you, one man commits a detestable offense with his neighbor's wife. In you, another man shamefully defiles his daughter-in-law. And in you, another of you leaders violates his sister, his own father's daughter. This sexual immorality, this impurity, this adultery, both in and outside the family, incest, it all occurred in Jerusalem, the holy city. This moral purity had completely broken down. Verse 12, and in you, leaders, are people who accept bribes to shed blood. You take interest, you make a profit from the poor, you extort unjust gain from your neighbor, and you have forgotten me, declares the sovereign Lord. Taking bribes, collecting unfair interest, high interest rates, making a profit at the expense of a fellow Jew, pressing a neighbor for personal gain. All of this took place in Jerusalem. And at the heart of it all, these leaders had forgotten God. That was the root cause of the problem. And God is presenting it back to them that this is the final straw. This is the final nail in Jerusalem's coffin. Verse 13, I will surely strike my hands together. Remember, striking the hands together was an act of speaking in authority. I will do this at the unjust gain that you have made, at the blood you have shed in your midst. Will your courage endure, or your hands be strong in the day that I deal with you? I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will do this. So this physical violence, this financial corruption, it had disturbed God so greatly that he pictures himself striking his palm with his fist. This is it, right? And the hearts of the people were not going to be able to bear up under his coming judgment of these sins, nor would they be able to maintain their own physical strength. That's what those verses mean. Verse 15, I will disperse you among the nations. I will scatter you throughout the countries. I will put an end to your uncleanness. And when you have been defiled in the eyes of the nations, you will know that I am the Lord. God is promising, one, to scatter the people of Jerusalem among the nations, to disperse them to other lands, and two, to refine these sinful practices away. When all Israel will be saved, and this speaks of Romans 11:26, in the future, when all Israel will be saved. Then all will worship God alone. That's in the time of Christ's millennial reign on earth. But that is not going to happen yet. So God is promising to scatter the people, to refine their sins away, and 3, they would not be able to maintain their holiness in exile. The nations that they are dispersed to would regard them as unclean, and then they would know that God was God. This was God's primary purpose in judging the people, verses 1 through 16. That second point that I mentioned, God would refine their sins away. We see that now in verses 17 through 22. So first there was the accusation. Now comes the judgment. Verse 17, then the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, the people of Israel have become dross to me. All of them are the copper, the tin, the iron, and the lead that is left over inside the furnace. They are but the dross of the silver. So God's comparing these present generation of Israelites to these base metals, tin and bronze and lead and iron, that burn away, that separate from the purity of silver in the refining process. No longer is Israel the silver. They are the burnt away base metals that are left in the furnace. Verse 19, therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, because you have all become this dross, I will gather you into Jerusalem, as silver and copper and iron and lead and tin are gathered into a furnace to be melted away with a fiery blast. So will I gather you in my anger and my wrath and put you inside this city, this furnace, and burn you off. God is planning to gather the people in Jerusalem, God's crucible. He's going to subject them to trial by fire, just as a refiner does in order to extract silver from the dross, from the tin, the lead, the copper, to burn it all off. Punishment for sin involves 3 major things. It involves retribution, correction, and purification. What is in view here is the purification. God is going to purify them in the midst of their sin. Verse 21, and I will gather you, and I will blow on you with my fiery wrath. You will be melted inside her, inside the city, this crucible, this fire pit. Verse 22, just as silver is melted in a furnace, so too you will be melted inside of this furnace. And you will know that I, the Lord, have poured out my wrath on you. There would be no mistaking why this was happening. God's wrath would be the fire that he would blow on the people, and they would melt, just like when a silversmith refines silver and burns off all this dross. God was going to refine his people of their sins, and then they would know that it was God who was judging them. Now we know that the Babylonians really did literally burn the city, Jerusalem. So this isn't just a metaphorical refining process. This is also a literal refining process. Not only would the city be literally burned, but the sins of the people would be burned off through God's anger, God's wrath. Verse 23, and again the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, say to the land, all of the land, you are a land that has not been cleansed or rained on in the day of my wrath. So Ezekiel now is to announce that the whole land of Judah had not been cleansed with rain. God had withheld rain as a punishment for the covenant disobedience. But this moral uncleanness of the people, Judah, had all accumulated because they hadn't received any rain, this cleansing that was coming from God. He had withheld it as a punishment. And it would receive no rain on the day of blessing, in the day when God would pour out his wrath on all the city. So it's not just the people of Jerusalem that are going to experience this refining process. It is all of Judah. Verse 25. There is a conspiracy of her princes within her, like a roaring lion tearing its prey. They devour people. They take treasures and precious things, and they make many widows within. God's proceeding to indict three categories of leaders, right? Ezekiel's speaking to the leaders. And now God's going to indict three specific categories. One being the false prophets. The false prophets had conspired to take advantage of the people. Like a wild lion tears away at its prey, so would these false prophets. These false prophets, they had eaten up the lives of the people. They had stolen their possessions. They had been responsible for the death of many individuals, for many women becoming widows. They most likely assured the men of the city that if you fight the Babylonians, you're going to succeed, while knowing that if they did this, they would lose. So these men, believing the false prophets, went to fight the Babylonians, and they got killed, leaving many widows behind. Jeremiah, if you remember, had told the people, submit to the Babylonians, don't fight them. The false prophets gave them the opposite advice. It led to the killing of many men, resulting in many widows. So God's indicting the false prophets. Now he's going to indict the priests. Verse 26. Her priests do violence to my law. They profane my holy things. They do not distinguish between the holy and the common. They teach that there's no difference between the unclean and the clean, and they shut their eyes to the keeping of my Sabbaths, so that I am profaned among them. So the priests had also abused the law. They had made common what should have been set apart to the Lord. They had treated the holy things and the profane things in the same manner, and they failed to teach the people the difference. Which the law clearly distinguished the difference between the clean and the unclean, the holy and the profane. And they had made, these priests, they had made the holy city anything but holy. They failed to observe the Sabbath. In short, they did not hallow the name of the Lord. Hallowed be thy name was not happening. So God indicts the false prophets, the priests, and then the officials. Verse 27, the officials within her are like wolves tearing their prey apart. They shed blood. They kill people to make unjust gain. So Judah's princes, the officials, the nobles, the kings, they abused the people in order to get what they could get out of them. They behaved, in a sense, like wild wolves. Her prophets whitewashed these deeds for them by false visions, by lying divinations. And they say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, when the Lord has not even spoken to them. So these false prophets assisted the nobles by saying, it's in the name of the Lord that what you are doing is right. So they were collaborating together. And by this horrible Jekyll and Hyde transformation, the authorities who should have been shepherds with the welfare of the flock at heart, they changed into these wild beasts that preyed upon the sheep. Verse 29, the people of the land practice extortion and commit robbery. They oppress the poor and the needy. They mistreat the foreigner. They deny them justice. These ordinary citizens also oppressed one another and stole from one another and took advantage of the poor and the needy and the foreign traveler and did all this illegally. So verse 30, so I looked for someone among them who would build up the wall and stand before me in the gap on behalf of the land, so I would not have to destroy it, but I found no one. God is looking for someone within the land of Judah who would lead a reformation that would defend the people from God's judgment, but he couldn't find any. And building up the wall and standing in the gap, the gap would have been formed by a breach in the wall. That was a very appropriate symbol for trying to fortify the people in their hour of need, but he found no one who would do that. And in chapter 14, we also saw that God had said that no righteous person could deliver the nation from judgment, not even Noah or Daniel or Job. We saw that in chapter 14. Here in chapter 22, God is saying again, he could find no one who would lead the people back to God. Now, that is hyperbole, because there were prophets in the day who were faithful to God's will. It didn't mean that throughout all the land of Judah that there was not one person who would lead the people back to God, because there were prophets that were faithful, Jeremiah and Ezekiel and Habakkuk and Zephaniah, which we'll look at. So it's not like there are none. What it means is that the people were so thoroughly defiant and morally deficient and rebellious that they weren't going to listen to anybody. No one was going to return them to following the covenant that came through Moses faithfully. Hezekiah had tried, Josiah, the king that had put these rough reforms into place, had tried. Jeremiah tried, and Ezekiel is trying. And so it doesn't mean there is no one. What it means is that the people are so far gone, they aren't coming back. They aren't going to listen to anybody. Verse 31, and so I will pour out my wrath on them. I will consume them with my fiery anger. I will bring down on their own heads all that they have done, declares the sovereign Lord. So because all of this, everything we just talked about, God was going to send his judgment like a flood, like a fire. He would bring the evil that they had done back onto themselves. The way that the tense of this verb is written, it's a prophetic tense in the Hebrew. What it means is it describes a future action as already happening in the past in order to stress the certainty of it to come. And that's what this indictment is all about. It's going to come. It feels like it may have already come to pass, but it is yet to come. And this is all being shared by Ezekiel, or by God through Ezekiel, to impart the importance, the certainty that this judgment was coming. So that is Ezekiel chapter 22. I pray that that has been a help to you. Tomorrow we'll look at chapter 23. We're going to look at another parable, and this is the parable of two sisters. So I look forward to that, but thank you for being here again this evening. I do appreciate you taking time out to be part of this study. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Till then, take care, and God bless. Bye-bye.